Kelly reports that there will be a 3 p.m. Eastern news conference with the state's attorney of Illinois, Cook County, sex charges against him. Watch Fox.
Fox News Alert, it's 2 p.m. in New York, and it's Friday, which means breaking news. We're following several major breaking news stories this hour. The owner of the New England Patriots, Bob Kraft, swept up in a Florida sex sting. Plus, Paul Manafort's sentencing memo is due by the end of the day. What could we learn there? And Jussie Smollett still insisting he's innocent, rejecting claims he staged a despicable hate crime to advance his career. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. The court of public opinion turning swiftly against Jussie Smollett, and now the show has written him out of the season's final episodes. Matt Finn is live outside the Empire studio in Chicago for us. Matt?
Dana, the executive producers of Empire say they consider Jussie Smollett a family member, but the past couple of weeks have been extremely emotional, and they are removing his character from the final 2 episodes of this season. The executive producers write in part, quote, "While these allegations are very disturbing, we are placing our trust in the legal system as the process plays out. We are also aware of the effects of this process on the cast and the crew members who work on our set, and to avoid further disruption on set, we have decided to remove the role of Jamal from the final 2 episodes of the season." Now, 20th Century Fox confirms that after Jussie Smollett was bonded out of jail yesterday, he came back to work here on the lot. There is aerial video that appears to show him leaving jail, his black SUV arriving here to the Empire lot. Smollett is facing major legal trouble, but there's also interest in whether this ordeal will cost him his entire career. The latest statement from 20th Century Fox says the studio understands the seriousness of this matter and is considering its options, and that is a change in tone from previous statements in which the studio denied writing Smollett off the show. Smollett's attorneys are fighting back against police and prosecutors in a statement, writing in part, quote, "Mr. Smollett is a young man of impeccable character and integrity who fiercely and solemnly maintains his innocence and feels betrayed by a system that apparently wants to skip due process and proceed directly to sentencing." At Smollett's bond hearing yesterday inside of a packed courtroom, the attorneys argued for approval of his release on bond, telling the judge he contributed to charities and is still backed by his employer Fox. The judge told Smollett he's innocent until proven guilty, but publicly chastised him, saying that if the part about the noose is true, it is outrageous because it conjures up the most evil part of this country's history. This afternoon, the FBI confirms to Fox News it is investigating that alleged fake death threat letter that Smollett mailed to himself, according to police. If he is found guilty of that count, he could be convicted of mail fraud, facing 5 to 10 years in prison. Smollett is back in court next month on that charge of falsifying a police report, and he faces up to 3 years in prison if convicted. Dana.
Thank you, Matt Finn. A Fox News Alert New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft charged with soliciting prostitution at a Florida spa. Police accused the football boss of paying for sexual acts twice, his name surfacing during an investigation of an international human trafficking ring. Molly Line is following the developments from Boston for us. Molly?
Dana, Robert Kraft, 77 years old, the owner of the New England Patriots, most recently winning the Super Bowl, now facing charges for soliciting a prostitute on 2 occasions out of Jupiter, Florida. He is among a group of men, certainly among the most prominent names that police have revealed thus far, and charged after an 8-month multi-investigation into essentially a human trafficking operation. The investigation focused on several massage parlors where women, mostly believed to be from Asia, were forced to work long hours as sex workers. The business that Kraft was allegedly driven to was called the Orchids of Asia Day Spa. Investigators went through the trash. They issued search warrants. And surveillance video was a big part of this investigation.
The question was, does the video contain Mr. Kraft inside receiving the alleged acts? The answer to that is yes. The 15th Judicial Circuit works is these are misdemeanor crimes. If you live and reside in Palm Beach County, you will receive a notice in the mail saying that you have a summons to appear in court. If you are outside Palm Beach County, if you are out of state, then you will have a warrant for your arrest here in Florida.
A spokesperson for Mr. Kraft had this to say: "We categorically deny that Mr. Kraft engaged in any illegal activity. Because it is a judicial matter, we will not be commenting further." Now, it's unclear what the next steps are for Mr. Kraft if he'll be potentially traveling to Florida. Dana? So
we don't know about that. Do you have any other information about how this also came together? Because it is interesting that it was a multi-month investigation going back 8 months.
Yeah, multiple agencies involved. And really, there was a lot of just very patient detective work that went on here. A lot of surveillance, a lot of watching who was coming in and out. They actually have very detailed, I can't put most of this on television, honestly, Dana, but very detailed information about various activities that occurred inside of this spa.
All right. Thank you so much, Molly Line. For more on this developing story, attorney and Fox News contributor Emily Compagno joins me. I'm going to see you later at 5 o'clock, of course, for the 5, but I wanted to get you here so that you can help explain. So Bob Kraft is saying that he's innocent, but what does happen if you are charged in another state?
Well, it would be smart if he would obtain legal representation at this moment and then have that attorney that's licensed there and have that attorney work with the police department. So there's absolutely no miscommunications. There's no warrant issued for him, so there's not some type of high-profile arrest that happens at an airport.
What he's being charged with is the solicitation of prostitution. How does that fall into the legal scheme, which of a larger investigation, which is apparently about an international human trafficking ring?
It's a very small component of it, but if I can take this opportunity to kind of shed light on the climate in Florida and also federally for this human trafficking. So Florida, for example, last year conducted another, just like this, a multi-month investigation that resulted in the arrest of 277 individuals. Same thing, prostitution, human trafficking, sex trafficking, etc. And the amount of crimes, it ranges the spectrum. And we've seen it already just in 2 days. We've seen everything from deriving income from prostitution to literally human trafficking. So Florida takes it so seriously because for some reason it's one of the hotbeds. Federally, we just charged last month 5 Mexican nationals with human trafficking, sentenced them to 15 to 25 years. This is the 3rd largest global illicit industry. It's over 100 billion a year. And so I don't want to diminish the alleged activities that Robert Kraft has undergone, but it is a small component in what is an extremely troubling, large-scale industry that spans 3 different countries, multiple counties, and the Sheriff Snyder of one of those counties in Florida, he called this the tip of the iceberg, and he anticipates, he said, hundreds of arrests to come.
From this one investigation?
Correct.
Okay, and also, just tell me about the climate of investigating human trafficking. It's been going on for a long time. I know it has been growing around the world, and sort of people forget that it's actually happening sort of all around them. We don't know. We've been trying to get a lot more education about that. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, before the Super Bowl, we had the quarterback from, I can't remember, Bengals, thank you. And he was representing an organization that's trying to shed light on the fact that there is a huge problem, especially like these big events, whether it be sporting events or concert promotions, things like that, that is when you have a lot of problems. And this obviously looks like it was something much larger than just one big event.
Totally. And to kind of respond to the climate of that, I think what viewers should take away is the fact that it permeates every single micro and macro aspect. So if you've noticed when you travel in airports or you sometimes go to restaurants in certain cities, like there's notices in the restrooms that say if you notice something suspicious or if you are being held against your will, etc. Hotels, everything like that.
Airports.
Exactly.
It's like if you're scared, if you need help, let us know. All right.
Yeah.
Emily Compagno, thanks for being here. If you could stand by too, we might need you for something else.
Yes.
Fox News Alert, R&B superstar R. Kelly has been charged with 10 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse in Cook County, Illinois. Let's get right to Jonathan Hunt, who has more on this story. Jonathan.
Dana, this seems to be getting towards the culmination now of what, of course, has been a years-long investigation into many, many allegations that the R&B star R. Kelly has, over the years, abused many underage girls. He is now, according to the Cook County State's Attorney, going to be charged, or has been charged, with 10 counts of aggravated sexual abuse. We're likely to learn a lot more detail about this in just around an hour's time, when that state's attorney Kimberly Fox is due to hold a news conference regarding these charges in Chicago. So we'll get a lot of detail then. What we know for the moment, for instance, is that the lawyer Michael Avenatti has been heavily involved in this. He will be familiar, of course, to our viewers for his ongoing battles with President Donald Trump. But Avenatti also deeply involved in this case. And he said last week that he recently gave Chicago prosecutors some new video evidence of Kelly having sex with an underage girl. Avenatti also due to hold a news conference. That's due 4 p.m. Central Time, I believe, which would make it 5 Eastern. So it'll be very interesting to see what Mr. Avenatti has to say then. He has said that the, quote, day of reckoning has arrived for R. Kelly. He said that in a tweet a short time ago. He has also said that he, Avenatti, has evidence that Kelly and what Avenatti called his enablers paid witnesses and others to rig the outcome of R. Kelly's 2008 trial when he was acquitted on child pornography charges. So we're going to learn a lot more in the next few hours. But after years of investigation, years of allegations, it appears now that prosecutors believe that they have the evidence they need. There is an arrest warrant out for R. Kelly right now. 10 counts of aggravated sexual abuse and a first court date listed at the moment as March 8th, Dana.
And a press conference at 3 p.m. So, Jonathan Hunt, thank you for that. Let's bring back Emily Compagno. I made you stay because there's all this breaking news and you're a lawyer. You can explain it to us. So why now with R. Kelly?
Because the videos that have surfaced with extremely troubling acts that were depicted on them. And remember before that this same county tried R. Kelly almost 10 years ago now, and they too at the time were armed with a sex tape, but the jury acquitted him. And so now we have from what I've read and understood, that was depicted on the video. I've read that. It's extremely troubling.
And then you were talking earlier before the show about the possible penalty here?
This is a Class 2 felony in Illinois, so it's 3 to 7 years per count, and there's 10. So he's faced, until proven guilty, 30 to 70 years. This is a really big deal. And remember, this is the same county, by the way, that's dealing with the Jussie Smollett case. Yes. It's the same prosecutor that's just recused herself. So it's a lot going on.
They're certainly busy. They're busier than we are. So we have, all right, so I'll see you on the 5. Thank you, Emily Compagno. Okay. So a Chicago Tribune editor has a stern message and a demand for Empire star Jussie Smollett, and he joins us next. And the family of the woman who left her at home in Alabama to join ISIS is mounting a legal battle to bring her back. Do they have a chance of getting her out of Syria when the Trump administration says no way?
When cravings hit back.
Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson says that by faking a hate crime, Empire actor Jussie Smollett did a lot of damage to society during a time when political tensions are at an all-time high. The Chicago Tribune editorial board writing, Jussie Smollett owes Chicago an apology. Cities aren't living beings, but if there are rare moments that bind a community in shared emotions, Chicagoans are feeling what Johnson was expressing, dismay and anger at Smollett's alleged transgression. Clarence Page is a syndicated columnist and senior member of the Tribune's editorial board, and it's great to have you with us today. There's so many different threads to this story, and because you are there in Chicago, you care about this community, you've written about this. What do you think is the most important thing at this moment that people should take away?
I suppose they should take away the fact that just because someone is famous doesn't mean that they're always brilliant, always in control. It looks like Jussie Smollett is a troubled young man, and it's a real shame. But what's really important, though, is how well the city has pulled together. You know, Chicago's known for its fractiousness on many occasions, but this is one where everybody is united out of, well, as the police superintendent said, anger, first of all, over the way that Smollett just so selfishly decided to exploit the police department and other people's goodwill, and the kind of damage that was done to group relations, racial, gender, etc. It's been that kind of a crazy roller coaster, but at the same time, people were united from the beginning. First of all, trying to figure out what really happened, because this whole thing, now everybody says they didn't believe it from the beginning, and I know what they mean, but there was such a rush to try to find out who had beat Jussie Smollett up and why, that people just held together for 3 weeks, and now folks want to see, well, first of all, our paper said that he ought to apologize to Chicago, to the city, because of the money, the time involved at a time when we've had some terrible homicide cases going on that the police could have spent their time on, as the superintendent pointed out. And this was a terrible exploitation of that and history, of course, the use of these inflammatory symbols like the noose, and the whole whole idea that these guys were yelling, "This is MAGA country," which made sense to nobody, because Donald Trump is not someone who carries elections in Chicago.
Yeah, in Cook County.
Nor do you have that kind of a situation where, first of all, I think Trevor Noah said a Trump supporter who is an Empire fan, they may be out there, but not likely they're going to be out mugging somebody in the middle of the night.
Right. I did want to ask you one other thing about media coverage, and it's not the one from the right. It was interesting to me to see several sort of coming from the left arguing that the media should not use words like allegedly or reportedly or according to police, because that was diminishing what had actually happened to him. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. I get complaints about that all the time. People don't want me to use allegedly for somebody who's obviously either a serial killer or some other heinous crime. But look what happened here. Now, folks who didn't say allegedly stuck their necks out and acted like Jussie Smollett really was attacked, that they believed it all. And then they find out that we should have said allegedly.
We should. Yep, those journalistic principles, the journalistic principles that we learned long ago, they still hold true. Clarence Page, thanks for being with us today. Have a good time at the Gridiron this weekend. We'll look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you, my dear. Appreciate it.
Thank you. President Trump's former campaign chairman could reportedly be facing more charges. Plus,
needles, essential for pine.
Special counsel Robert Mueller faces a deadline just hours away to file Paul Manafort's sentencing memo, which could reveal news and details about the Russia probe. Catherine Herridge is live in Washington with more as this story develops. Catherine?
Well, thank you, Dana, and good afternoon. The sentencing memo could come at any time today with the midnight deadline. This is yet another data point that suggests the Robert Mueller probe is winding down. Manafort pled guilty in September to 2 counts of conspiracy related to his lobbying work in Ukraine as part of a plea agreement. The judge sided with the special counsel prosecutors a few weeks ago that Manafort had misled investigators, made false statements, thereby violating or voiding that agreement. The expectation is that prosecutors will not recommend leniency in this case. For some context, this is one of 2 criminal cases. The other is in Virginia for Manafort, and it also goes to sentencing on March 8th, yet another indicator that the probe is in the end game. In the Virginia case, Judge T.S. Ellis is considering the sentence where federal guidelines call for Manafort to get as much as 24.5 years in prison for a separate tax and bank fraud case. This comes as a new media report suggests that prosecutors in New York State have also prepared tax and bank fraud charges against Manafort related to his lobbying work in Ukraine. Earlier today, the district attorney's office in New York offered no comment to Fox News on the Bloomberg report. What's not clear is the mechanism that would allow New York State prosecutors to work around laws that shield defendants from being prosecuted twice for the same alleged crimes. They call that the double jeopardy.
Yeah, double jeopardy, indeed.
Yeah, that's right.
Call Alex Trebek. All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you. The father of this Alabama woman who went to join ISIS in Syria, plus the father of the Alabama woman, we just said that, she's filing a lawsuit against the Trump administration to let her back into the United States. We will have legal reaction with John Yoo. Plus, Jussie Smollett reportedly told his Empire castmates he is innocent even after the police press conference. So what's next for him? We'll discuss.
Central banks load up on gold. What do they know?
We also have some concerns and some appearances of obvious money laundering in this case that we'll be investigating further. Much of our evidence comes directly from the businesses, also from body-worn cameras of our officers, and also surveillance that we had been conducting over the last several months.
The Jupiter, Florida police chief describing the evidence on Patriots owner Robert Kraft, who is charged for solicitation of prostitution as part of a human trafficking investigation. And moments ago, the NFL releasing a statement saying the NFL is aware of the ongoing law enforcement matter and will continue to monitor developments. The father of the Alabama woman who moved to Syria to marry an ISIS fighter, well, she's now suing to bring her back to America. The Trump administration says she's a terrorist and cannot re-enter the country, but she insists that she belongs here.
Papers, and I know, in fact, that I was a citizen. And when I tried filing for a passport, it was very easy. It came in 10 days. So I thought I didn't have a problem. And I'm sure there's no problem. And I know my lawyer hopefully is working on it, and he will win the case.
What do you want to do if you went back to the States? What do you think will happen to you if you were allowed to go back?
Of course, I'll be given jail time.
John Yoo is the Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush, now a law professor at UC Berkeley, and joins me now. So I'm pretty fascinated with this because this has sort of been an issue that's a long time in coming, not just for the United States, but for other countries, especially those in Europe, that had young people that decided to go and fight with ISIS, and now what's going to happen to them. In her case in particular, and she won't be the only one, right? But this one is very interesting. On the citizenship issue, the United States government is saying she is not a citizen. How do you see it?
Right, Dana. It actually depends. What was her father's status when she was born in I think Hackensack, New Jersey in the mid-90s? According to, and this is not a partisan issue, but both Trump and the Obama administration have found that she was born to a Yemeni diplomat. If she's born to a diplomat, even though on U.S. soil, she's not subject to the 14th Amendment's jurisdiction, and she's not a citizen.
Can I ask you something about that, though? Because I heard this morning on the Daily podcast, the New York Times podcast, when she was interviewed, she said that her father had been fired. So he had not been a diplomat for a month, and then she was born. Does that make a difference?
It really depends. I mean, that's their factual allegation. The government thinks otherwise, and this is something that has to be resolved. But it's up to the executive branch, usually, up to the president and the State Department to make that kind of decision.
If not, is she just stateless?
Well, she's still a Yemeni citizen. Right?
Well, you want to go back there? I don't think so.
I've got no plans to. I have not bought
Nobody wants to go to Yemen. Right. Well, I also am curious about this, which is, if she were to come back to the United States, would we be able to send people to Guantanamo Bay for trial? So in that scenario, we've not sent American citizens there, I don't think.
Right. No, that's exactly right, Dana. Even in the Bush administration, no American citizens were ever sent to Guantanamo Bay. There was actually a guy named Hannity who was born in the U.S. in very similar circumstances. His dad was just here for a year. It was decided to bring him to the United States.
And the government lost that case at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, on the kind of hearing he should get. But the United States didn't lose the position that he was a prisoner of war and was fighting against us. So if she's a citizen, she'll come back, and she's going to be charged with serious crimes, material assistance of terrorism. She could get 20 years. She could get life, depending on who she was helping. If she's smart, she's going to try to reach a deal. She could provide a lot of intelligence information to the FBI and the CIA, so there might be a good reason.
But would that be of any use now that the ISIS caliphate is kaput?
Well, think about what's been going on over there. Thousands, apparently, and this is what you're worried about, what I'm worried about. Thousands of ISIS agents are trying to filter back to Europe and the United States. She's probably seen a lot of them in person and could help identify them. On the other hand, she's someone who turned her back on her, allegedly on her country. I don't know if it's possible to trust her again. She's going to have to be able to really help our intelligence agencies if she really wants to not spend the rest of her life in prison.
She's been doing these interviews, and I'm not saying she's sympathetic, but you can look at it like, wow, what were you thinking, lady? But it's different for me, and this is my personal opinion. Like, that's terrorism to me. But she has a child. She also has all of this social media. In which she was expressing, she wasn't regretting it when she first got there.
Passport on.
Yes, she said it was going to be a bonfire, about to have a bonfire with her passport. And I'm curious what you think will happen for all of these others. Do we need to have a more robust policy? Because she's not going to be the only one that we have to deal with.
Right. In fact, she might be too easy a case because there's a good argument she's not a citizen. What about dozens, if not hundreds of others who are American citizens, have American passports, and are trying to get back into the country? Now, unfortunately, they're like, I think ISIS is sort of like it's not like the Roach Motel. You can't collect them all in Syria and get them all. Instead, they're scattering. And in some ways, it's going to be a harder problem for our intelligence agencies to get a handle of because these citizens might have been cooperating with ISIS. We may not know. And then they show up at the border with their passport and they're going to be.
Do you think that the United States has the laws that it needs in order to deal with this issue, or is there a congressional angle here?
I don't think so. I think there is a crime on the books. It's called a material assistance to terrorism, and our prosecutors know how to charge people. The hard thing is getting the intelligence to figure out who went over there and who's coming back. She's making it too easy by posting pictures of herself on Facebook. What do you do about people who are?
It's a very thorny
undercover?
Issue. It's been a fascinating one. Thanks for being here today, John Yoo. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Dana.
So now that Empire star Jussie Smollett's character has been written out of the remaining episodes of the show this season, what's left of his career, if anything? Let's bring in Eric Desenhall, author of Damage Control, The Essential Lessons of Crisis Management, which I imagine Jussie Smollett's lawyers and communications team will want to grab a copy because it's a fantastic book. And I wanted to ask you, Eric, is this any different from scandals that you've seen in the past, or does it fit a pattern?
Well, I think one of the patterns is this. I think that when people get caught, what I find is everybody always says, why don't they come out and admit it? Well, the last person to realize what trouble they're in is the principal in a scandal. And this goes back to the Bible. What do Adam and Eve do when they get caught? They cover up. They deny. And in order to admit what you did, you have to admit what you are. And that's some very hard cheddar to cut. So it takes a while. And the reason why this is such a rough one is because there's a difference between making a mistake and orchestrating a scheme. And the allegation here is not that somebody did something stupid, which we all do, but that someone orchestrated a scheme for the entire premeditated purpose of profit and did so by trying to tap into emotional concerns about how vulnerable people are treated.
And it goes right to the heart of the culture war, as you said.
Well, on one side of the culture war, you have people who have legitimate grievances. On the other side of the culture war, you have people who are tired of hearing about everybody's grievances and have the tendency to believe that those grievances are either overblown or fabricated. This taps into both and doesn't bring out the best in anybody.
But let me ask you this about when you have a client like this, as a lawyer or a communications team, you come and you know that they're in big trouble. But he last night, even at the set of Empire, where he was doing some finishing work, I guess.
Yeah, he doesn't know.
So is that, how does he not know? I don't understand that.
Well, you're dealing with human psychology, and again, I come back to the idea that to admit what you did is to admit to what you are, and a lot of times people like this, in fact, in almost every case I've ever seen, they genuinely believe themselves to be victims. Even if they did the thing they're accused of, the rationale is, I had a reason that people like you just don't understand. And so the first thing you have to consider is, do you want to take a client like this? I've made mistakes in my career about taking corporations and individuals on before they had the realization of what they can do, then of what's doable. And then you have the issue here, I've heard people say he needs to apologize. Well, if your position in a court of law is that you're innocent, you cannot apologize because apologies are admissible in court. So you have to figure out, do you want to accomplish a legal objective or a career objective?
Any thoughts on the media coverage of all of this from either side or either angle, or also about the problem that being a victim is celebrated and that this leads to this kind of false report?
Well, that is the core problem here, is that we want to believe that people who are suffering are legitimately suffering and we want to help them. When somebody tries to co-opt our feelings of protectiveness toward the vulnerable, there really are very few worse types of manipulations. And you see a lot of people who fall for things like this, whether it is a racial incident or the Me Too movement, where it's getting harder to differentiate between people who really have a good grievance and should be protected and people who are exploiting a climate for their own profit.
All right, Eric Desenhall, I always love learning from you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Dana.
House Democrats taking a formal step to block President Trump's national emergency declaration, introducing a resolution to block it. It seems likely to pass a Democratic-controlled House, but faces a tough path in the Republican-led Senate. President Trump declared the emergency after Congress denied the full funding he demanded for his proposed border wall, and some saying that that is unconstitutional. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi plans a Tuesday vote.
We continue to urge Republicans in Congress to join us to uphold the Constitution and defend our system of checks and balances. I cannot say it enough, but I do say that the president is not above the law in any way, and in this action that he is taking, he is circumventing the Constitution of the United States, and in doing so, does violence to it.
President Trump vows to veto any measure that blocks his emergency declaration. Why a federal judge says the prosecutor in the Jeffrey Epstein plea deal broke the law. Plus, Zion goes down and Nike takes a financial hit. How the heck did this happen? Ahead, Tyrus will weigh in. And follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at Daily Briefing, and follow at Daily Briefing FNC on Instagram and Facebook.
Fact is, Americans move more than
I'm Trace Gallagher in for Shep. We're waiting to hear from President Trump. We'll see if he weighs in on any of the 3 major legal cases we're following right now, including Empire actor Jussie Smollett accused of a hate crime hoax, New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft caught up in a prostitution sting, and singer R. Kelly now facing sex abuse charges. That's coming up on Shepard Smith Reporting.
North Korea saying it now faces a food crisis, forcing the country to cut rations to its people by almost half. The country blaming high temperatures, drought, and United Nations sanctions. And this is all coming ahead of next week's second summit between President Trump and leader Kim Jong-un in Vietnam. Be sure and tune in to special coverage Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as Ed Henry reports live from Hanoi. A federal judge accuses Labor Secretary Alex Acosta of violating the law while serving as a U.S. attorney in Miami. The judge saying he offered an illegal plea deal to the wealthy financier Jeffrey Epstein, who is accused of paying for sex with dozens of underage girls. Rick Leventhal is here to explain. Rick, what's going on?
Well, Dana, the deal that Epstein reached with prosecutors over 10 years ago was remarkable based on the number of possible victims and the fact that he was facing up to life in prison. Instead, he basically spent half a day behind bars for just over a year. Epstein, who's now 66, made a fortune in finance, buying a huge home in New York City, a private island, and a mansion in Palm Beach. Police first began investigating him back in 2005 when allegations surfaced that he paid a 14-year-old girl to strip and massage him for $300. An undercover investigation found evidence dozens of underage girls were paid for sexual encounters with Epstein and his friends. He never went to trial. In 2008, his lawyers reached what the Miami Herald called the deal of a lifetime with prosecutors in the office of now U.S. Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta, who was U.S. attorney in Miami at the time. Epstein pled guilty to just 2 state prostitution charges. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison and released after 13. He had to register as a sex offender and pay restitution to some of the victims. And now a federal judge has ruled that the Department of Justice broke the law by hiding that agreement from more than 30 young victims. Florida federal court judge Kenneth Mara wrote in his decision, particularly problematic was the government's decision to conceal the existence of the agreement and mislead the victims to believe that federal prosecution was still a possibility. You know, a lot has been made about the fact that that Epstein was friends with President Trump before the scandal broke, but he was also friends with Bill Clinton, who records show flew on Epstein's private jet more than 24 times.
Yes. Okay. So all of this is coming sort of together. But for Epstein and getting this deal, do you think that is because he is rich or because there were some politics behind the scenes?
Could have been. I mean, he's a wealthy guy with a lot of powerful friends. And, you know, another question is what happens now? And that's not entirely clear. The judge did not overturn Epstein's plea deal. He gave prosecutors instead 15 days to confer with the victims and their attorneys to come up with some kind of settlement. Now, we want to read you a statement that came from the Department of Labor, which is standing by Acosta, saying for more than a decade, the actions of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida in this case have been defended by the Department of Justice in litigation across 3 administrations and several attorneys general. The office's decisions were approved by departmental leadership and followed departmental procedures. But it is still possible this case could be reopened. Epstein and potentially others could still be criminally charged.
Wow. And it is interesting if the judge says that the Justice Department broke the law. Yeah. So then they have to follow up. This is not just going to go away.
Oh, and they will. And we're going to find out sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Rick Leventhal, thank you. That's a wild, scary report. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Republicans in Virginia are asking for a public hearing for the women accusing the Commonwealth's lieutenant governor and the sneaker that exploded on national TV, leading to an injury, putting college basketball under the microscope.
Sometimes you just know when you've hit a home run. That's why I use Blue Emu Pain Relief Spray. It's fast-acting, odor-free, and it soothes all my aches and pain. And if you're like me, you'll also love the non-greasy, deep-penetrating Blue